The flashing blue lights on a dark highway were not just enforcing traffic law that night. They were announcing a collision between a rising political force and a system that had already decided it felt threatened, and South Africa felt it before the handcuffs even clicked shut. By the time the speed was announced, 215 kilometers per hour in a 120 zone, the story had already escaped the road and entered the bloodstream of national politics because this was not an ordinary driver, and this was never going to be treated as an ordinary offense. It was the 19th of December, 2013, late at night on the N1 near the Vaal, and Julius Malema was behind the wheel of a BMW heading south, months into forming the Economic Freedom Fighters, fresh from expulsion by the ANC, and already marked as a problem that refused to disappear quietly. The dashcam footage tells a deceptively simple story: a high-speed pursuit, sirens cutting through the night, a luxury car slowing down, pulling over, and a man stepping out calmly, deliberately, walking toward authority instead of away from it, as if he already understood that resistance would be symbolic rather than physical. What the camera does not show is the weight of history sitting in that moment, the memory of who gets stopped and who gets spared, who sleeps in a cell and who sleeps at home, and why South Africans would soon start asking questions that had nothing to do with road safety. Malema was arrested for reckless and negligent driving, processed, and moved from Barrage Police Station to Vanderbijlpark, where he spent the night alone in a cell, a decision that instantly transformed a traffic offense into a political event loaded with meaning. Hours earlier, another South African, a white musician and public figure, had been caught speeding as well, 169 kilometers per hour in an 80 zone, charged with the same offense, yet released the same night on 500 Rand bail. Malema's bail was set at 5,000 Rand, 10 times higher, and he remained behind bars overnight, and that contrast ignited something uncomfortable across the country, because the law was supposed to be blind, but here it appeared to be watching very carefully. Was this simply about speed, or was it about sending a message, and if so, to whom was that message really directed, and what does it say about equality when the same charge produces such different outcomes? The Gauteng Traffic Police spokesperson tried to anchor the narrative in statistics, calmly stating that it was unfortunate Malema was a politician, but that he remained the highest recorded speed offender of the festive season, words that sounded technical yet landed politically. Unfortunate is a curious choice of language because it suggests awareness that the arrest would not remain procedural, awareness that the image of a radical black leader in handcuffs would travel faster than any BMW ever could. By morning, Malema walked out on bail, and what could have been a moment of personal embarrassment became something else entirely, as supporters flooded the court, singing, dancing, turning what was meant to isolate him into a public demonstration of loyalty and resistance. The EFF had been officially launched only months earlier, still testing its footing, still dismissed by many as noise rather than movement, and suddenly here it was, mobilized, visible, and emotionally activated by a single night in a police cell. Think about how quickly that happened, how a routine enforcement action transformed into a political rally, and ask yourself whether power always understands how its actions ripple beyond their original intent. Malema did not deny the arrest. He did not retreat. He stood before cameras and spoke with controlled defiance, insisting he was not complaining, that he would present his side, but also pointing to what he believed was a broader campaign to discredit and humiliate him. When he spoke about organizations protecting white privilege, those words landed hard because they reframed the arrest not as a legal event, but as part of a long argument about who the system trusts and who it polices more aggressively. Even those who disliked Malema found themselves unsettled because the comparison was clear, the disparity visible, and the questions unavoidable: why one man slept in a cell and another did not, why one bail was symbolic and another punitive. The case dragged on for months, quietly, without the same media intensity, until February 2014, when the Vanderbijlpark Magistrates Court threw it out due to insufficient evidence to prove recklessness, ending the legal process, but not the political meaning. If the case could not stand in court, then what justified the overnight detention, and why was urgency applied so selectively, and what does that tell us about how authority behaves when it feels challenged? For Malema, The acquittal was not just vindication. It was confirmation of a narrative he had already been telling, that the law in South Africa still carries the fingerprints of inequality, even under a democratic constitution. He took that moment and folded it into a broader message, arguing that this is what happens when Black leaders refuse to be polite, refuse to wait their turn, refuse to make peace with inherited power structures. And this is where the story becomes less about one man and more about a pattern, because countless South Africans have lived versions of this experience without cameras, without supporters outside courtrooms, without a platform to speak back. Ask yourself how many similar cases never become national debates, how many people simply absorb the humiliation and move on, and what it means when one person has the visibility to expose it. The establishment may have believed that arresting Malema would slow him down, frame him as reckless, unfit, dangerous, but instead it added another layer to his political identity, that of someone willing to confront the system and survive its response. Context matters here because in 2013 the ANC still dominated the political landscape, the DA positioned itself as a technocratic alternative, and Malema was the outsider, expelled, financially strained, rebuilding from scratch. A well-timed arrest could have finished him, or at least that may have been the calculation, but politics rarely follows the script written by authority, especially when resentment and memory are involved. The image of Malema walking toward the police car that night, calm, deliberate, has lingered because it mirrors how he has approached power ever since, not fleeing, not apologizing, but challenging it directly. The flashing lights behind him were not just law enforcement. They symbolized an entire system attempting to reassert control over a narrative that was slipping beyond its reach. And a decade later, that question has not gone away. It has only grown louder, because every attempt to publicly humble Malema has seemed to strengthen his symbolic power. This story unsettles because it refuses closure. It leaves us asking whether equality before the law is a principle we believe in or a performance we maintain, and whether South Africa has truly escaped the habits of its past or simply learned to dress them differently. The road that night ended at a police station, but the argument it ignited is still racing forward, unresolved, uncomfortable, and demanding answers from anyone willing to look honestly at who the law protects, who it punishes, and why that still matters today.